Hello, everyone. Alex is
I was
the
enjoying that
sun's out.
intro music.
Yeah, you can tell the sun's out if Alex is dancing because
Uh,
you've only just got back off holiday, haven't you, Alex? So
yeah, I went to Mallorca last week, but I must apologise to anybody watching this. The hay fever is well and truly. The
yeah,
Birmingham pollen today is kicking me about a little bit.
the
So
the Birmingham pollen. You make it sound
the,
like it's a strain like COVID, like
yeah,
the
we've got
Birmingham pollen strain.
we've got our own strain up here.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't suffer with that, so I am very lucky. So, yeah, let's get started. First of all, thanks to everyone tuning in today. Alex, I'm sure everyone knows who you are, but for those who don't, do you want to introduce yourself?
Alex Gooch, head of build to rent here at Inventory Hive. So essentially, I oversee the onboarding of all of our purpose-built block clients, along with some of our student accommodation, retirement homes as well, along with some of our PRS and letting agents, and just oversee the general process that all of our customers experience, essentially.
Brilliant stuff. And I'm Mitch. I'm the marketing manager here at Image Hive. We've started doing these live streams now for about, I think it's about 6 months now. We're trying to do them every 2 or 3 weeks just to cover off a few topics which are being discussed, especially in the PRS and in the build to rent market. So one of the ideas that we came up with today is obviously the cost of living is rising, the petrol prices. I drove past a petrol station last night, over £2 a litre. Like, it makes you think it's
Because
probably cheaper to stay in now or
that's
forever.
because you're out in the sticks in Derby, mate. So,
Yeah. So
no, on the subject of rising costs, though, this rising heat does mean that we're going to use less utilities this month, most definitely, which
that
is a
is a
good
good
thing.
point.
And
Yeah,
that brings us nicely on to
nicely onto utilities, because as everyone knows, the price of utilities is just shot through the roof. I like when I first bought my house, I was paying around 50, £60 a month, and now that's trebled. And uh, it just makes you think you're using the exact same products, the exact same stuff, but it's just trebled. And it's come to a point where landlords, letting agents need to make sure they've got all the house in order to make sure that they're not getting stung on any cost in any way. So that's why we thought we'd do this live stream today, just to show the importance of why it's important to do utility meter readings at check-in and check-out for various reasons. So we'll run through those today.
it's also going to aid with sort of the landlord element when it comes to void periods as well, to
Yeah.
make sure that you've done those, well, which I'm sure Mitch is going to cover anyway. But
Yes.
when you're
Yeah.
covering your check-ins, your check-outs, you've got an exact copy of the meter readings at point
Yeah.
of tenancy start and end,
Yeah.
which is then obviously going to help the
Yeah.
accuracy when it comes to costs
Yeah.
from a landlord perspective, at least.
Mm. Well, it's important, as everyone knows, it's important to do your check-in and check-out reports because you're protecting the asset. You want to make sure the schedule of condition is what you expect. You've got to make sure there's no deposit disputes and anything like that. But obviously, with utility meter readings, you can record those at check-in and check-out as well. The most popular way for landlords to offer utilities is part of inclusive in their tenancy agreement. Some people like to keep it separate, but I think one of the main reasons why landlords and letting agents like to include utility meter readings as part of the tenancy agreement is just to make sure the bills are actually being paid. Because if you're relying on the tenant to pay those bills and they're not paying those for whatever reasons, then it could come back to the landlord. So making those part or inclusive of the tenancy agreement means you're managing that, and those bills are being paid no matter what.
Yeah, there is obviously fors and against of both inclusive and putting the ownership onto the tenant. I
Yeah,
think we generally do see. I mean, it's not something that necessarily at Inventory Hive we get involved with, but obviously we have a lot of different conversations with a lot of different management agents, landlords, build to rent providers, and everybody does something a little bit different. In
yeah.
fairness, Mitch, obviously you've had a conversation recently where that agent does tries to offer a bills inclusive, which is obviously what's prompted this conversation now. So
Yeah, perfect. So what I'm just going to briefly show you now is on Image Hive, obviously, you would have seen from our reviews how easy it is to create reports, but also how easy it is to just capture those utility meter readings as well. So let me just share my screen, and it's really simple to do. The, it is, again, really important to do. So hopefully my screen is showing now.
It is.
Something quite clever about Image Hive as well is when you get to the property, it's really easy to add in those meters. So you might go to a property that you're not familiar with. So you just go into the property, you can add in the gas meter, for example. I'm just going to give it an example name. You can choose the supply if you know it. So this is quite crucial because if you ever need to contact the tenant needs to contact the utility company for any reason, that will also sit on the check-in report. You can type in the long serial meter reading number if you really want to, but if you want to be really clever on Image Hive, if you just take a photograph of that, then it can capture that number. So if I just choose this one here, Image Hive will scan that, and you can just choose the numbers here. So rather than typing in Z03FF or whatever, you can select those and that will get uploaded in. So it will just save you time. You can add in a photograph of the location as well. So it's really detailed and everyone knows where everything is.
It's important at this point just to say that on Inventory Hive in the system, you only have to do this for the first visit to the property, adding on the meter itself. And this is where it's helpful. So if when Mitch scrolls down, you've got sort of like the meter location and things
Yes.
like that. When it's potentially a different property manager going to visit the property to do an interim inspection or the checkout as well, potentially it saves them the need to look around. So like when it's in the back cupboard under the stairs, and you had no clue of even knowing where it was, you had to guess
Yeah.
and just fumble your way through it.
Yeah.
The details are already in there, basically.
No, that's a really good point, Alex, because like I said, sometimes you could turn it to a property like you could spend 20 minutes just finding where the meter readings are. So yeah, so I've added in that meter and now I'm ready to update the readings. So I'm just going to add in the meter readings. Again, you can manually type those in, or you could just add a photograph of that and it will capture the readings on that photo. So as long as you take a clear picture of that, it will capture that. So it's a bit of a double bubble. So you're capturing the actual manual readings as well as a photograph of that.
Yeah, it's always good to basically evidence what you're inputting into the report. So that written description, or in this case, the written number, it's backed up by that photograph essentially.
Perfect. So that's all done. And then all you simply do now is just follow the relevant steps and complete your report. So when the report's completed, it will get, this is an example report on the Inventory Hive website. You can access this at any time and it will just sit nice and simply in your checking report. So if I just scroll down to the utility meter readings, it will show here the serial photo, the location, and if you scroll down further, the actual meter reading as well, just here. So it's all captured everything nice and neatly at the start of the tenancy. So you can also feed those readings back to your utility supply as well. So you can almost track the charges. So if another thing that I've read as well is tracking the charges actually helps in the future to make sure you're incorporating the cost in your tenancy agreement for the utility bills, just to make sure you're not charging too much or undercharging as well.
Yeah, that's with a bills inclusive
Yeah,
option, just to specify. But equally, on the flip side, it's important for you to hand those readings. So if you're not a bills included option when you're letting out the property,
yeah,
if you're handing across your meter readings at that point, they know that everything prior to that was not the tenant's responsibility. Everything after that is essentially the tenant's responsibility. So it just means that then the landlord um, or operator isn't being charged for something that they haven't used essentially.
yeah, exactly. Something that might happen as well is this is why it's quite important to record these readings, especially at check-in, because there might be some cases where the tenant leaves the property unexpectedly. So you don't know what the readings were when they moved in. So the landlord or agent or the property manager, might get stung with some unexpected charges because if you've not recorded that at check-in and the tenant moves out unexpectedly, you don't know what charges they've incurred if it's not inclusive as well. So making sure the landlord is covered on that basis and they're not getting any unexpected costs is quite crucial. If the tenant does leave, then you've got to prove to the utility company that the tenant was responsible for those utility bills. So that's why ensuring that's all detailed in the tenancy agreement and you've recorded that at check-in, just make sure the landlord's covered as well.
Yeah, exactly. You're all sort of covered from that point. I mean, another reason for actually tracking these as well. I've recently been working with a build to rent operator, and I know this is common within the build to rent industry. Obviously, this won't necessarily be applicable to your single property landlords and some of our letting agents, but they in essence bulk buy a
Yeah,
certain supply of energy from a provider, and then they distribute that throughout their building and obviously apportion it accurately per each property. But taking a meter reading at the start and a meter reading at the end, that's going to give them a good estimation of how much energy each apartment type would use potentially, and
yeah,
then they can forecast for the following year how much energy they're going to bulk buy, because then
yeah,
obviously if you always know there's economies of scale with everything in life nowadays, but if you can predict accurately how much you're going to have to bulk buy, then that means that you can recharge that to your resident at a lot lower rate, which is another incentive to get people into your building,
yeah.
and because they've got cheaper utilities essentially, which the point
No,
of today's
yeah,
stream is
yeah.
somewhat paramount, that the cheaper we can make things, the better.
Exactly. That leads me nicely onto an example checkout report because, like you said, having that side by side comparison is crucial because then you can monitor the charges and the costs going forward. So, this is an example checkout report. Again, you can find this on our website and it's got a clear before and after date of the readings of what it was when they moved in and the reading when they moved out. And obviously, it incorporates photographs of that as well. So, that's why having this a platform like InVitrive makes this a lot easier. You can easily send these to any utility providers as well, just to make sure your readings and costs are accurate and up to date.
Just going off on a tangent slightly from that, I had a conversation a couple of weeks back with a letting agent actually, and their before and after readings didn't match up, and
Yeah,
essentially it wasn't a bills included tenancy. It was, and I don't want to go off too far, but the resident themselves, obviously, they if they were responsible for the energy itself, then they are entitled to change supplier if they wish. That
yes,
new supplier had changed the meter. That's where Mitch is highlighting the point of adding the serial number in for that
yeah,
meter. You could then clearly see of, oh, this isn't ZF zero
no,
zero
yeah,
one two three anymore.
yeah,
So that's why there's a disparity between the two readings.
yeah. Something I was reading on a forum as well is that there's sometimes quite a few, well, not disputes, but quite a few arguments between um, like HMO properties or multiple occupancy properties where one tenant might say, well, I don't use hardly any gas or electric. It's tenant B or C who uses it all. So why am I being charged the same? So it's interesting to learn what kind of conversations or agreements a landlord or agent might put into place for that. And that's probably why having a utilities inclusive agreement is why they're so popular because it's really difficult to track every single tenant's usage.
I can understand the need for it from a HMO
Yeah,
purpose, 100%. Unless you're going to individually meter each unit
yeah,
within, which is quite rare, at least in my experience, on a HMO.
yeah,
I would say the bills included option is probably going to be most common within HMOs.
yeah. It's almost like it would be interesting to learn what percentage of landlords don't actually offer that agreement. And I think going forward, it's probably needs to be, well, not needs to become standard, but making sure that's all in line, then it will make sense for the landlord just to track the progress.
I think
Um,
it's just as long as everybody's all on the same page, isn't it? With
yeah,
as with everything in life, communication is key.
yeah, exactly. So I think that pretty much comes towards the end of our live stream, making sure tracking utilities is never become more important, especially with the rising costs. And I expect in October time, I understand there's going to be another price increase. So making sure that's all noted. It might be worth noting on your midterm inspections as well, um, that expect the utility meter readings cost to go up as
I
well.
think that's a very good point, Mitch, and that sort of reverts back to the point that I was making previously about swapping meters themselves and changing
Yeah,
supplier. It isn't necessarily a standard on
no,
midterm inspections for property managers to go in and read the utilities, or at least in my experience and people that I've spoken to. However, it might now be considered a good practice to
yeah,
go in and do that, because then you can identify if they have swapped meters early, you've still got a reference point for the next report. I think that's a good
no,
point,
yeah,
Mitch. But
definitely.
on a personal note, and this isn't necessarily related to property reporting, I think it's important for everybody now, where you're responsible for your bills, to start submitting meter readings to your energy suppliers
Yes.
at the end of each month. I think estimations have somewhat gone out the window now with
Oh,
the rising
absolutely. Yeah.
costs.
It's
I think it's important that you get these accurate now.
yeah, especially I think on my bills, I'm sure I was being overcharged, so I reduced the costings down because they were basing it on the estimates.
Yeah,
Because I joined in early winter, so obviously I was using more, but right now, obviously,
you
because
got
of
to
the
keep
warm
them
weather,
toes toasty in the winter, and you mate.
exactly, yeah. It so they're almost using an average of my winter usage
Yeah.
over the summer as well. So making sure that accurate and up to date, like I said, it is key, and making sure you're feeding that back to your utility provider.
Yeah,
Um,
I think all of that's just a useful practice in
yeah,
general if you're responsible for utility readings in any capacity.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, that pretty much concludes things today. Anyone got any questions? Just get in touch with us through our website at imagehive.co.uk, or just drop us an email at info@imagehive.co.uk, and we're offering a free 30-day trial at the moment. So get in touch. More than happy to show you guys the ropes and help you guys with your property reporting. Thanks again, Alex. You've been top top guest again, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks for another live stream.
Take care, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.